Flannery O'Connor said, when you can't assume that your audience holds the same beliefs you do, you can relax a little and use your normal means of talking to it. When you have to assume that it does not, then you have to make your vision apparent by shock. To the hard of hearing, you shout, and for the almost blind, you draw large and startling figures. Now, for those of you who don't like shouting and enjoy relaxing, you might find these cultural shifts that we're experiencing in 2025 a welcome reprieve from the insanity of left-wing radicalism. For instance, Joe Scarborough and his very, very young co-host, whatever her name is, has had to go hat in hand to Trump to restart conversations with him now that he is going to be the president. You mean that Trump who is a Nazi, fascist, racist, and of course, the convicted R word? But I was told that we don't negotiate with terrorists.
No. We don't negotiate with terrorists.
So maybe Trump isn't all those things, and we were lied to for multiple years by the media, and it deceived weak-minded people. But this change of heart doesn't just start and stop with MSNBC. We can still pray for Joy Reid. We see it in Apple's new advertising praising the white nuclear family, as they show a father who is hard of hearing putting in AirPods and then being able to hear his daughter very clearly for the very first time. What? No trans flags?
No! God, please, no! No!
And then, of course, we have Mark Zuckerberg apologizing for allowing the Democrats to use him to censor the free speech of fellow Americans. And then even, crazy enough, the LA Times calling for a bias meter in their reporting. If that's not enough, Disney just reported that they pulled a transgender storyline from one of their new series. Will wonders never cease? The fact that they're missing an opportunity to try to brainwash children into LGBTQ ideology is startling, to say the least. So what if Trump being reelected means that there's a vibe shift coming for America away from the godless nihilism that we've been experiencing as a nation for nigh on decades now, and a shifting back to the faith that made America? We'll talk about that and more today on Indie Thinker. Welcome to the show. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. My name is Reed Huberman. Our show today is sponsored by our friends over at Sweet and Savory. And yes, we're going to start the new year off right by continuing to advertise for the same amazing company that we have for the past couple of months. And the reason for that is that if the Daily Wire can support ExpressVPN to the point where you're not sure that they do anything without the money of ExpressVPN, then you can rest assured that we will also gladly take your money if you want to support the great work that we're doing here at Indie Thinker, and Sweet and Savory has done just that. But it's not just that they support us, but it's a great business for you to support. So if you want to turn over a new leaf in this new year and learn how to cook, maybe you want to take your wife out for a fantastic date night and you want to save a little bit of money because you want to learn how to cook the great food that you're going to eat rather than just give it to the restaurant. Well, Sweet and Savory Classroom is for you, because not only will they teach you how to cook some of the most amazing food, but you can also experience that in an atmosphere that's fun and enjoyable that will make for a great and unique date night for you and your spouse. Now, to see everything that they have to offer, all you have to do is go to sweetandsavoryclassroom.com, and there you'll find that even if you don't live in the Chattanooga area, you can find some online courses that are fantastic for you and the whole family. Now, when you check out, you want to make sure that you use the promo code IndieThinker for a discount on your order and to let them know that Indie Thinker sent you. I also want to make mention of the fact that 2025 is going to be a humongous year for Indie Thinker. We're going to be launching into some brand new productions that will span the gamut of many things, but most immediately and most importantly will be a brand new show with an all new host. I want to introduce you to Caleb Callahan and a little bit of what he's going to be offering you in the new year with this brand new Indie Thinker podcast, because we just did a guest show, and here's a little bit of what we talked about.
You know, the thing that really, when I was dealing with agnosticism, that really brought me into the Christian faith in a different way. As an agnostic, we're saying, I don't know that you can actually know truth. Like, I hear you Christians out there, and you're saying all these things, but how do you know? Like,
Right.
How can a broken, finite person contained by time and space and material, how can we know that which is outside of us, the eternal? We can't know that. And here's where Christianity is super unique and where it really rocked my world. Well, the eternal came into our world.
That guest show will air this Sunday, and you don't want to miss it. We talked about some amazing things that'll be really helpful to you, I think, in the new year and give you a really good snapshot of what we're after here at Indie Thinker. But more importantly, after that guest show, you'll be able to go over to Caleb's channel, subscribe there, and experience all the great content that he has to offer you. Now, let's jump into the show. James Damore was an employee for Google in 2017, and he had the misfortune of enduring a DEI workshop. Now, this was the beginning stages of DEI when it was starting to infiltrate corporate America before it became the huge conglomerate that it is today. And James Damore, after that DEI session, was asked, along with other Google employees, to comment anonymously, or at least comment in a way with impunity about the DEI session that they just endured. And James thought frankness, especially since he was given impunity with his response, thought he would be honest about it. And he suggested that the endless desire to try to pretend that men and women are exactly the same seemed to be a bit tedious to him and ridiculous, given the fact that it sure seems, especially within their immediate context, this doesn't really seem to be true. So the fact that there were more men in his position may have something to do with the fact that men are more inclined toward that kind of practice and toward that kind of occupation. But that was too much for Google, and of course they fired him. Now, the idea that men and women are actually different doesn't seem to be too novel, except in the woke movement, who has increasingly tried to destroy everything that is true and uphold everything that is a lie. For further information about this, all you have to do is look at the fact that men and women are different in the way in which they use the bathroom. For any woman who has ever tried to pee standing up, we can tell very quickly that men and women are different. All that to say this, that the startling realization that men and women are different was in 2017 something that James Damore thought he could get away with, but silly him. He would soon find out that the woke movement would try to do the best that they can to totally redefine everything. And his story is just a little bit of a touchstone as to what our culture would have to look forward to under the guise and auspices of the woke movement. Well, of course, we've endured that now up until the present, but all of that began to change. And I think perhaps you can look at this change specifically taking place when Elon took over Twitter in 2022. Because when he let that reality sink in, some other realities started to come to pass. One of them being the fact that people could actually say things once again that they thought were true without self-censorship. Now, I know that there's still a little bit of question as to whether or not you can do that on X, but the reality is that Elon and much of his work has been a great buttress against the excesses of the woke movement that is still pervasive right now, even in the present. But perhaps all of that's going to change as Trump takes office in 2025, because his election certainly seems to signal a vibe shift in culture, and that the excesses of the woke movement will no longer be tolerated. Now, there's an article that I read that I won't read completely to you, but I think is at least worth mentioning here. I would encourage you to read it all, and I'll link it down below. But it's called Vibe Shift, and it's by a guy named Santiago Pliego, and every bit of it is fantastic. But if you want to know at least what the Vibe Shift is, here's what he had to say. The vibe shift I'm talking about is the speaking of previously unspeakable truths, the noticing of previously suppressed facts. I'm talking about the give you feel when the walls of propaganda and bureaucracy start to move as you push. The very visible dust kicked up in the air as experts and fact checkers scramble to hold on to decaying institutions. The cautious but electoral rush of energy when dictatorial edifices designed to stifle innovation, enterprise, and thought are exposed or toppled. Fundamentally, the vibe shift is a return to a championing of reality, a rejection of the bureaucratic, the cowardly, the guilt-driven, a return to greatness, courage, and joyous ambition. Pliego will go on in this article to suggest that the vibe shift looks like this. Ditching childless civilizational nihilism and saying, yeah, having kids is good actually. I know, crazy, right? Maybe a declining birth rate beyond, well below. Replacement is enough to kind of wake people up that heteronormativity may actually be a good thing for society. And then the vibe shift is also the rejection of reality denial and instead embracing that men and women are unique and actually different. And then the vibe shift is, most importantly, a rejection of secular liberal materialism and a return to the Christian foundations of the West. And this is where I think the vibe shift is most important, obviously for Christians, but all of us in society today. Because I hope we can see by now that secularism has been a destructive force in society. First and foremost, secularism is problematic because it's shallow. See, the idea of secularism is that religious ideas and definitions do not have a place in the public square. So already you can see that secularism is a closed-minded endeavor, that whenever any religious ideas come along, no matter how virtuous they are, no matter how good for society they are, the secularist will shut the door to those ideas, call every religious person stupid, say you believe in fairy tales, stick their finger in their ear and say la 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 over and over and over again until you finally go away and get tired of speaking to them. This is the shallow behavior of immature secularists all over the place, I think part and parcel of the new atheist movement, which is now all but dead, thankfully. When you have Richard Dawkins claiming to be a cultural Christian, we can rest assured that maybe they're starting to turn over a new leaf in 2025.
I call myself a cultural Christian.
But secularism hasn't just been shallow and closed-minded, it has also been incredibly destructive. I hope we can tell by now that secularism, just with a very brief glance at history, has done absolutely nothing beneficial for society whatsoever. Now, people will make claims to the Enlightenment and all sorts of other scientific discoveries, but of course we all know that scientific discoveries were created, as C.S. Lewis said, because people believed to see law in nature because they believed that there was a lawgiver in nature. All that to say that secularism hasn't brought us anything, contributed nothing to society whatsoever. And in fact, it hasn't just been non-contributive, it has also been incredibly destructive, because about the only thing that it has brought to society is the deconstruction movement. And of course, the deconstruction movement is famous for destroying everything and building absolutely nothing. So hopefully, we can celebrate this vibe shift and a return specifically to the Christian foundations of the West. And I can prove that this vibe shift is happening, at least in that way, because we recently saw that Bible sales last year went up 20% at the same time that book sales and the book industry was experiencing a deficit by about 3%. And then we also saw that Bible studies are returning to public school classrooms. And for those of you who have a problem with that, well, I'll just say, get used to it. And then one staggering study came out that revealed that men are going back to church for the first time in American history, more so than women. Now, to be clear, women are leaving the church in record numbers, which is causing the number of men in churches to rise. But this is also because men in Gen Z are going back to church because there is something inside of them, a God-shaped hole that they know cannot be filled with any of the secular nihilism that our world is presently offering us. And it's my hope that Christians will see that they can have a positive influence on culture if they will take advantage of the power that they have to truly influence our world. And I pray that once we get an appetite for that, we'll see that culture making is useful, not only for the betterment of society, but for the Great Commission, which, by the way, isn't just a good idea, it's a divine command. All right, let's jump into our top stories today. Hope everyone had a great New Year's Eve celebration, even a great Christmas over the break. It was very refreshing for me. Hope it was for you too. And I think we can all agree on New Year's Eve, we were optimistic and we felt like we were going to experience a new future with a new president, maybe a gilded era of peace and tranquility. But on New Year's Day, all of that changed. And
welcome to hell, mother!
By now, you likely all know that in the wee hours of the morning, a man with an ISIS flag on his truck plowed through a crowd of bystanders, killing 14 and injuring 35 in New Orleans. Hours later, another attack took place when a man named Matthew Liversberger drove a rented Cybertruck in front of a Trump hotel in Vegas and blew the truck up only after taking his own life. Since then, we've learned the following: that one, both men in both separate terror attacks used the same rental company to rent their vehicle. Both men were veterans. Both men served at the same base in Fort Bragg, albeit at different times. And then both men served in Afghanistan at exactly the same time in 2009. Now, the FBI, who first stated that the attack in New Orleans was not a terror attack,
this is not a terrorist event,
while covering an ISIS flag from public view, was later forced to tell us all what we already knew, which is that it was a terror attack. And now they are desperate to try to convince us that these two incidents, with all of these similarities, are totally unrelated. And while that may be true, why should we believe them? But it's not going to help us very much if we turn to independent media either, because Sean Ryan is breaking some insider information, supposedly, that suggests that the FBI and others in the deep state will never tell us the truth, and in fact, that perhaps none of this stuff is as it seems. So here's a clip from Sean Ryan's podcast.
Very capable guy, but he loads the Tesla up, which Elon Musk brags about being bulletproof, right? So this is one of his selling points. It's bulletproof. We even saw Joe Rogan shoot an arrow at it and wasn't able to puncture this thing. So he loads up a Tesla knowing it's not explode like he wants it to with fireworks and a bunch of other junk when he can make a car bomb that's going to level this place. Here's what I think. The Army PAO is saying that the body inside the cab did not match the DNA of his child. All right. We also know they said he was shot by a desert eagle. We know that there was no signature when it rolled up. So nobody shot themselves when it rolled up to it. You would have seen a large signature. Mr. Guns and Gear, he's on X. He goes into this a lot in depth. He's a firearms expert and he talks about this. There's no signature. So this is what happens. You get a Tesla because you know it can drive itself to the hotel, the Trump Tower. You put a body in it, roll it up. You don't want to kill anybody because that's not the message you're trying to send. You're not trying to level the tower or kill a bunch of people. So you load it up with fireworks and a bunch of junk to send a message. And we know that his signal number or his signal safety number changed. That can't be done unless you're inside that signal account. And a lot of people conjecture, was the FBI inside his signal account, whatever else. But what if he accidentally changed his safety number, goofed up there? He rolled a body up in a Tesla specifically because a Tesla can drive itself up to the tower, and did what he did to send a message to expose his stuff. And he's still alive out there somewhere.
All of this and more reminds us that we just don't know who to trust. And it even stretches the credibility of our belief in independent media. And I like to go to those sources myself because I think that they're far more reliable than anybody else in the mainstream. But now we ask ourselves, who can we trust when everything is up for grabs and we do not have really any bearing of what is true? And in times like these, what I like to do, and I think it's an important principle, is to kind of pull back from the granularity of these details and remind ourselves of the things that we can know beyond a shadow of a doubt. And the first one is this. And it may seem at first a little bit off the subject, but I think it's a good reminder. And that is that abortions still kill more people in a day than all of the terror attacks we saw on New Year's Day. As grotesque, as awful as they were, and as shocking as they were, we still need to shock ourselves back to the reality that abortion is the #1 killer every single year in America, especially of the most innocent and precious human beings. So Planned Parenthood is responsible for 70 times the amount of death on a daily basis as that New Orleans attacker was. So according to analysis from the Liberty Council, over 1,000 babies are taken each day in Planned Parenthood clinics. And according to Worldometer, 45 million babies were killed last year worldwide. So it's an important reminder to us that as shocking as what took place in New Orleans and in Las Vegas is, that it should be way more shocking what takes place in America every single day. And until we create a culture of life away from a culture of death, we can expect that our society will continue to unravel. And the second point is this. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the New Orleans driver had an ideology that motivated his attack. Now, this may not be true of the guy in Las Vegas because people are saying PTSD and he's a veteran and all that stuff. And there's a lot we could say about that. Let's push that to the side for a moment. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Islamism is what is behind this New Orleans attacker. And it is definitely the reason that he did any of this stuff. This has been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. And this is where we're going to have to be honest with everybody about the impact of this ideology. Islamism is a militant and evil religion. Now, I am not going to argue that all Muslims will all of a sudden turn into terror attackers or conquerors or anything like that. In the same way that not all Christians read the Bible and pray, not all Muslims actually practice their faith. But I will argue this, that the faith of Islam is dedicated to conquering the world and to converting every living soul to Islam by force if necessary. All that to say, I want to encourage you to kind of back up what I'm saying with some resources, with some information. So you can go and follow somebody on Instagram. It's a great follow, at Reed Huberman. Now that may sound serving, but there you will find not only great posts, but you'll find one in particular post that compiled data around the world of the worst places to live, and wouldn't you know it, according to the UN, Amnesty International, and tons of other places, the worst countries to live in, without fail, are almost always Muslim, because they are the greatest human rights and civil rights abusers, and they have the least amount of economic prosperity. And on the other side, the best places to live in the world are all predominated by Christian society. So you can think that Islamism is incidental to this, but I think now you're just trying to throw your brains in the garbage and not admit what we all know, that Islam is bad for society. And if that's true, then what we're going to have to acknowledge is that we're going to have to pick a religion that we want to be the basis for our society, not only because there has never been a religionless society in the history of the world, but also there is no such thing as a religionless person. Now, this is where the atheist is going to jump in and say, what are you talking about? I don't have a religion. Atheism is the lack of a religion. But of course, that is a cop-out. Every single atheist, as with every other person, has a belief system. They're not immune to this. They have a belief system that they order their life around, and they have a God. It just may look like them. And quite frankly, I think it would be way stupider to worship any atheist more so than the God of the Bible. So all that to say is, I hope we can see that, as G.K. Chesterton said, that when you stop believing in God, it's not that you believe in nothing, you'll believe in anything. Religionless societies do not exist. So we're going to have to decide, what is the religion that is best for society? And the obvious truth here is that, historically speaking, and by all the evidence that we have available to us in the present, Christian societies are the best societies. So that means, even if you're not a Christian, you need to be intellectually honest enough to say, bring in the Bibles in the public school, bring prayer back, let's do it all in Jesus' name. You don't even have to necessarily believe that Christianity is a true religion to acknowledge this simple fact that Christianity has been beneficial to the Western civilization that you enjoy. It's good for democracy, it's good for freedom, it's good for economic prosperity, it's good for all of us. So all that means is that what we need is a reclaiming of Christian truth in the public square and a total rejection of the idiocy of secularism if we're going to be truly, truly honest about the existential crisis that we're facing in the present. And then there's one final point in all of this. One final thing that we can know beyond a shadow of a doubt. One of the problems with cutting off our nose to spite our face when it comes to Christianity in the culture is that when we are left with no one to believe, we are left with a nihilistic proposition. And that proposition is that we can never know the truth. In an ever-changing world, it would help to have something solid to grasp onto. This is probably more relevant to the second attack, but it helps us with any of the issues we have today in a world where you don't know who to trust anymore. When we find ourselves lost in a finite world where we do not know the truth, it forces us to do one of two things. Either we grasp at straws and follow every conspiracy theory that comes along, or we do what I think is more healthy. We pull back outside of the moment and return to rock-solid truths that never change. If you don't hold to a holy God and the truths found in Holy Scripture, that leaves you out of luck. But for Christians, we can pull back no matter what the circumstance and settle on transcendent truths that hold us all together. Truths like this: humans are depraved and the institutions they create corrupt. So it's okay when you can't trust them. We can often trust the material world way less than we often do. Placing our faith and hope in something that's bigger than that preserves our sanity. Because when we can't trust our media and we can't even look to independent media, we can realize something, that no mentally ill vet and no lying deep state can override the God who will expose all darkness and bring it into light. So what I am not saying is to disengage from culture and then just to retreat to our conclaves in the church. I'm not saying that. Sure, take conjecture wherever it leads you. Follow the evidence. I'm just saying do it loosely. Be skeptical of whatever you're told and hold fast to the unchanging Lord of glory who sits enthroned upon all of the affairs of this earth, so that you're not shaken every single time our institutions fail us, because it'll happen over and over again, as it just did when Joe Biden presented the Medal of Freedom to a group of undeserving people. Now, when you hear the word freedom, you probably, like me, think about Jesus and looking to those who had just crucified him in him, saying, "Father, do not hold this against them, for they know not what they do. Don't charge them with this, set them free from their sin." Maybe you think about Braveheart. But when you hear the word freedom, two people that you definitely don't think about is George Soros and Hillary Clinton. Now, you might even be able to make an argument for Magic Johnson and Denzel, but you don't think about George Soros and Hillary because let's just say those people aren't on the nice list. I mean, Santa was up in the North Pole scratching his head and thinking, how do these people bring freedom to our world at all? So for those of us who need a reminder, or maybe for those who don't even know who George Soros is, you should know that George Soros is a globalist, left-wing radical who is responsible for the destabilizing of many societies, including our own, by promoting radical left-wing DAs in blue cities who are soft on crime, who will destabilize law enforcement, and then also destabilizing our southern border by giving hundreds of millions of dollars to his Open Society and other organizations that promote open borders. So he has enjoyed the destabilization of society because it's meant money in his pocket. And here he is in an old interview that he probably doesn't want you to remember, where he applauds the destabilization of society because it means that he can become wealthy.
In the last 2 years, you've been blamed for financial collapse of Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, and Russia.
Yeah, all of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Are you that powerful?
No, I think there's a great misunderstanding. I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do. As a competitor, I've got to compete to win.
So if it's not bad enough to destabilize economies and ruin the lives of millions of people, George Soros is also responsible for another great act of freedom. So when you think about the word freedom, you probably think of people who confiscated property from the Jews during World War II, and you'll see him talk about it in this clip.
George Soros, am I talking to now? The amoral George Soros or the moral George Soros?
It's one person. It's one person who at one time engages in amoral activities and at the rest of the time tries to be moral.
You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old. And I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
That one should think ahead, one should understand and anticipate events, and one is threatened. It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes, yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
Now, fair enough, as a young man, you don't have the kind of moral responsibility that you would as an adult. But he told us in this clip, he was 14. It's not like he was 8. He wasn't 4. He wasn't 5. He wasn't being drug along, kicking and screaming. And who knows what responsibility he had in actually ripping away some of the property of these Jews. But what we can know is that his response seems odd, given the fact that now he is a fully functioning adult, albeit with devil horns and a pitchfork. Any rational adult would have some sense of sorrow for the role that they played there, but instead we just get, oh, well, I was a kid, and sure, I guess it was bad, but I don't think anything about it. That is not a response from a moral man that deserves the Medal of Freedom. And then, of course, the famous, the well-known, fantastic dancer, Hillary Clinton also got the Medal of Freedom. Now, you'll remember Hillary Clinton from riding her husband's coattails into the White House and into the position of Secretary of State so that she could eventually campaign as being the President of the United States. You'll remember also her great act of smashing her phone with a hammer so she didn't have to turn it into the FBI and bleaching hard drives, and the biggest scandal of all, which is the Benghazi scandal. For those of you who don't remember, she had to answer to Jim Jordan for essentially saying that this was a spontaneous protest that happened in Benghazi, not necessarily a terror attack, and they didn't know it at the time because they didn't want to take responsibility for it. Here's Jim Jordan, all the way back in 2012, grilling Hillary Clinton over what took place in Benghazi.
Secretary Clinton, I appreciate most of those attacks were after the attack on the facility in Benghazi. You mentioned Cairo. It was interesting what else Ms. Newland said that day. She said, if pressed by the press, if there's a connection between Cairo and Benghazi, she said this: there's no connection between the two. So here's what troubles me. Your experts knew the truth. Your spokesperson knew the truth. Greg Hicks knew the truth. But what troubles me more is I think you knew the truth. I want to show you a few things here. You're looking at an email you sent to your family. Here's what you said. At 11 o'clock that night, approximately 1 hour after you told the American people it was a video, you say to your family, 2 officers were killed today in Benghazi by an Al-Qaeda-like group. You tell the American people one thing, you tell your family an entirely different story. Also, on the night of the attack, you had a call with the president of Libya. Here's what you said to him: Ansar al-Sharia is claiming responsibility. It's interesting, Mr. Katala, one of the guys arrested and charged, actually belonged to that group. And finally, and most significantly, the next day, within 24 hours, you had a conversation with the Egyptian Prime Minister. You told him this: we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. Let me read that one more time. We know, not we think, not it might be, we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. State Department experts knew the truth. You knew the truth, but that's not what the American people got. And again, the American people want to know why. Why didn't you tell the American people exactly what you told the Egyptian Prime Minister?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jim. The reason that Hillary Clinton did not immediately tell the American public that this had nothing to do with a protest and actually was a planned terror attack, because Hillary Clinton has a legacy to protect, after all. Not only was this 56 days before Barack Obama would run for re-election for his second term, but also likely Hillary Clinton knew that she was going to run for president after Barack Obama. Her time was up, and they wanted to protect their political legacy by saying and suggesting that what took place in Libya under Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama was a securing of democracy, that Libya is now a greater, freer state because of the foreign policy of these Democrats. But of course, we know that's not true. What actually happened at the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi is Hillary Clinton didn't want to send troops in there because she didn't want to agitate it and make it worse than it already was, because she was more concerned with her political legacy. And as a result of that, 3 Americans died and the U.S. ambassador were killed because of the violent attack on that embassy. But of course, Hillary was quick to tell the American public that this was just a spontaneous protest and something that we weren't prepared for, in order to follow Ben Rhodes' lying, PR campaign, so that she didn't have to actually take responsibility for this and so that she could campaign on this thing. So the whole point of all of this is not only that these 2 fools did not deserve a Medal of Freedom, but probably more importantly, as meaning-seeking beings, we want symbols. We need icons to help us think about duties, morals, and truths that deserve praise. This is what Augustine shows us in the City of God when he wrote about the fall of the Roman Empire, that it's not enough to have Pax Romana, Roman peace, but we must have faith in God in order to hold a society together. Without that, our peace only becomes an opportunity to pursue our lust, which destroys us from within. We don't have to worry about enemies at the gate. We have ourselves to look at as the problem. We saw this at this ceremony with yet another sign of what a broken culture looks like, much like Rome's. When all religions are equal and everyone chooses their own path, evil becomes good and the preoccupation of the people. When that's true, only revival can save us, but be forewarned. Revival is almost always brought about by major suffering. Nonetheless, I pray for it and place my hope in God for it. But maybe, just maybe, if we awaken before God sends his merciful wrath upon our nation, we can turn around. Maybe if we begin to focus on praiseworthy things, we can avoid what has come to every civilization before our own. We are not immune to it. So best we look to things that are worthy of praise if we're going to truly have a society that is praiseworthy. We'll get back to the show in just a moment, but I want to mention to you one of our show sponsors. Our friends over at Sailor Ridge can give you a much needed break. Are you tired? Maybe you're looking for a vacation destination to get away for Christmas. I can offer no better place than the picturesque North Georgia mountains with our friends over at Sailor Ridge. They have 3 amazing locations that will get you off the grid and in a place where you can actually think and you can soak in the beauty of God's creation. All you need to do to see all that they have to offer you and your family is to go to SailorRidgeTreeSort.com. Now, one of the things you'll also want to do is make sure that when you check out, you use the code IndieThinker10. Not only will that let them know that we sent you, but it will also give you a fantastic discount because I am a Christian at the end of the day and I care about you. So I want to make sure that I give you a great suggestion and give you a little money off. You need to show them some love by going to SailorRidgeTreeSort.com. And in our final story, Justin Trudeau is stepping down as Prime Minister in Canada. So this is a good day.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister.
1, it means that we don't have to annex Canada as the 51st state of the United States, which would be awful for all of us. We don't need any fellow Americans going around saying a and a boot or anything like that. I mean, Jordan Peterson will take, but you can have the rest almost entirely. But this is also good because Justin Trudeau is an avowed feminist.
But I want you to know that I am, and always will be, a proud feminist.
And of course, we all know this is horrible because feminism is one of the most destructive forces in human history. It's responsible for the breakdown of the family, which is essential for society, and it is also responsible for skyrocketing abortion rates. Also, Justin Trudeau deserves to step down because he was a climate extremist. Also, he's a totalitarian.
Prime Minister, you twice were found guilty of breaking the Ethics Act. After those 2 convictions, did you decide to read the act?
What he did to debank his fellow citizens who were protesting during COVID is an act that I think even Stalin is from that burning place where he now spends eternity, is somehow appreciating, if you can appreciate anything in that place. He's also a horrible Halloween party guest based upon his costuming. For all those reasons and more, it's a good day that Justin Trudeau is stepping down, but mainly because of this one thing, because we need virtuous men in leadership. Now, I look to our own nation and I think to myself, this is something that we need to be honest about. That very often the least deserving people become the most powerful people, or the ones who have positions of importance. We praise and we look up to the people who are least deserving of it in terms of their moral virtue. This is true of Joe Biden in the sense that I honestly believe that Joe Biden had no business being president if he cannot take care of his own household. When you have a son who is a derelict drug addict going around sleeping with prostitutes left and right, filming it while leaving all of those films on a hard drive and then just leaving that at a computer store, all while taking bags of cash from foreign governments around the world using your daddy's name, I think that in and of itself is a disqualifying act. I mean, according to Scripture, that you can't even be a pastor of a local church if you can't take care of your own household. And that's very true of Biden. Why would we trust Biden to take care of this nation when he can't even take care of his own child? But this is the problem with where we are, especially in Western culture today. We put people in positions of power who are the least deserving of it. And I think this is because we don't know what true virtue looks like because we've totally ejected the Bible, Christianity, and Jesus from public life as a moral good. And in the process of doing that, now we're left with a vacancy in terms of, well, where do we actually derive virtue from? And to date, nobody has come up with a moral code, a moral system greater than what we see in the Bible. But the real problem is that we don't know where virtue comes from anymore. We don't know if virtue is just some personal proposition, or if virtue is just a social construct that we all tell ourselves, but there isn't really such thing as virtue. The reason for this is because we have become postmodern, and the more postmodern we have become, the less Christian we have become, and the more existential crisis we have put ourselves in. Because when there is no meta-narrative, when there is no one story that we tell ourselves and believe, well, then everybody can believe whatever story they want. But the problem with that is it doesn't work in society, and it doesn't create virtuous leaders. It creates people like Justin Trudeau. If we're going to be serious as Christians about our civic duty, then we're going to have to realize that the church is not a building. It's not even an institution. The church, according to Scripture, is the body of Christ, which means that we are not relegated just to a building on a certain day during the week. But actually, it would be more right to say the city is our church. And this is what Wesley said. He said, "The world is my parish." It isn't until Christians realize this, that they have a moral obligation, a civic duty to make their world a better place, that we will actually, truly create the kind of leaders that we would like to see in office. But the public outcry over Trudeau is a good thing because it shows that we still have power to make changes and to do something that can truly make a difference. It's now time for Christians to let their outcry be heard. You can do that in boycotts. You can do that by becoming a member over at Indie Thinker. You can do that by surrounding yourself with Christian content. You can do that by making sure that you support financially the things that deserve to be supported, and making sure that the platforms who have the loudest voice are the ones who are preaching the most truth. All of that is within our power. And if we do it, it'll make a better world for you and for me. All right, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you liked this show, you need to become a member over at Indie Thinker. For the price of a cup of coffee, you can each month find great Christian content, and this month, an exclusive movie that you do not want to miss. And all of that comes to you by being a member of Indie Thinker. You can go to indiethinker.org/support to sign up today. But you can also check our sponsors down below. Don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe, and go with God.